Hi class, in today's video we're going to go through 4.1 Middle Ages and 4.2 Renaissance. We're going to do the entirety of Unit 4 all in one go. Today in this video you should be looking at how music was used in different settings, specifically the difference between sacred and secular. I really want you to remember those words throughout this entire semester. They're going to keep coming back, so I need you to remember sacred versus secular. I also want you to kind of think of what are the different contributions each type had to the different musical styles. We talked about previously how the Romans came and instruments were not in sacred music. Well, that continued. We don't have music or instruments in sacred music. We get a cappella styles, which means there's no instrumentation, it's just voices. We also get monophony, which means one. So typically in music that you're accustomed to listening to, you have multiple lines. You have maybe a main singer, some backup singers singing another part. You have a guitar playing another part, drums playing another part, lots of layering. Monophony meant one layer, one thing happening. Everybody's doing the same thing. We also get plain chant, similar concept, plain, not a lot happening, very simple, clean sounding, but it's chant is the difference. We start to get Gregorian chant named after Pope Gregory. Pope Gregory wasn't necessarily the person who started Gregorian chant. We're not for sure, but Pope Gregory gathered a book of chants. So he was responsible for organizing and writing them down. Neumes was a method of written music, and this picture right here, this is an example of written neumes. I have no idea how to read that. It's very difficult to read. It wasn't exactly common between peoples. It was not widely used, and so it did fall out of use. We also get organum, which starts to develop polyphony, poly meaning many, and it starts to have more lines, but it was based off of plain chant, and they took an original plain chant and added to it. So answer the question in the question box. Who was Gregorian chant named for? Was it Pope Gregory or Hildegard von Bingen? Who was Gregorian chant named for? So a little bit more about plain chant versus polyphony. Remember, plain, very simple, only one thing's happening. Polyphony meaning many. So plain chant, there's one vocal part. It's very monophonic. Everybody's together. Polyphony, there's different parts singing, different voices singing different parts. They're not all necessarily singing the same thing. So it's not like a round where they're kind of layered. They're kind of doing their own thing, might not be singing the same rhythms. They don't follow the same contours. So if you look at written music, it kind of follows a contour. They're not all doing the same contour at different levels. They're all just like doing this business. Polyphony is polyphonic, meaning there's many lines. During this time, we have what's called the tritone. And when we were talking about pitches and intervals, the tritone is a really difficult interval. It is notoriously difficult to get in tune. But during this time of the Middle Ages, it was considered the interval of the devil, and only because it was just really hard. It was just a nickname that was given to it. So the big thing I want you to remember about tritone, it was just ridiculously hard to get in tune. So what does it sound like? I'm going to play a clip of a tritone, and this comes from the Simpsons theme song, The Simpsons. I'm going to play a clip of it, and I want you to describe it to me, what it sounds like, and why you think it's really hard to get in tune. So what is the difference? I told you I want you to remember sacred versus secular. So sacred, this is church music, and it could be any religion, but during this time period, we're typically talking about Christianity. We get organum. Remember, this is polyphony based on plain chant, monophonic, one thing happening, a cappella, no instruments. Secular, this is of the people, lots of instruments, everyday topics. unrequited love, that is a beautiful flower. I went to war. These are the kind of topics we're talking about. It wasn't usually written down because the people weren't usually literate. They could not necessarily read and write. It wasn't very common for the everyday people to be able to read and write. So it was passed down in an oral tradition. Typically polyphonic, meaning many things are happening. And they, like I said, they used instruments. Lots of things were happening. So these pictures over here, these are of singers doing polyphonic music or secular music. So which of these options is not a style of sacred music? Organ, chant, monophony, or polyphony? Which one is not sacred? We talked about how neumes was one way that music was written down, and it really didn't have a pitch or rhythms. It was very difficult to read and to understand. We started to get solfege, and Mr. Guido de Arezzo created a system that singers would use to help them sight read the music. So different note shapes corresponded, and note types corresponded to solfege. We still use solfege, and so if you're thinking in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 are so the tonic, the chords. So if we're in key of C, C is going to be 1. It's going to go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Don't expect you to memorize those. I just want you to remember that solfege, it's a hand system to help singers sight read music. And more methods of being able to denote pitch and rhythm and meter became common during this time period and would slowly develop into what we still use today. So we've been talking about church music. Now let's go into everybody else. Let's talk about the everyday people. We get troubadours, trouvères, and jongleurs. They are all traveling minstrels. Just depends on what country and what region of the country they're from, on what name they are called. And so they're just traveling minstrels. They travel everywhere and spread their music. We get motets, and this is a type of music that's typically about love, and they're typically a little bit funny. It's mostly polyphony. I'm going to keep going back to this word, polyphonic, meaning many, polyphony. And we get the lute. So the lute is a stringed instrument, and this was very common. So I want you to listen to a clip of this song. Summer is a kumen in, and I want you to listen to them sing this piece and how they intertwine, and they are moving back and forth in and amongst the different lines.
Summer is a coming in, now we sing cuckoo. Groweth seed and bloweth mead and springeth wool anew. Sing cuckoo, you bleateth after lamb, not after calf or cow. Bullock started flock to fun, but merry sing cuckoo. Cuckoo, cuckoo, no singest thou cuckoo, no seest thou ever now. Summer is a coming in, 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 sing with cuckoo, sing with cuckoo, after lamb, after lamb, after.
Now that you listen to it, tell me about it. What did you hear? What did it sound like? Moving into the Renaissance, we're out of the Middle Ages. We have gone forward in time to the Renaissance, and we get things like humanism, and Greek themes are coming back. We get imitative counterpoint, canon, and melodic contours. So humanism, this is kind of the idea that it should connect to the emotions. This is coming back from the Greeks. We're bringing it back. We also really like to use Greek themes and stories. We like to reduce, reuse, recycle. It's coming back. Imitative counterpoint. This is when you have one melodic line that looks like this, and you have another one that kind of imitates the same shape. They got a little counterpoint situation happening. Canon, this is like row, row, row your boat. You've got one person going row, row, row your boat, and somebody else coming in and singing the same line. They're singing the exact same thing, they just start at different times. A melodic contour, sort of been talking about this. This is the shape that the music takes. So if you look at the written music on our screen, if you were to connect the dots of the notes, that's the melodic contour, the shape that the music makes. So which type of composition do different instruments start playing and or voices start singing at similar music theme at different times? Is it imitative counterpoint or monophony? So each time period has their own little aspects that kind of are their little quirks of the time period. We talked about imitative counterpoint, but the next one I want to talk about is word painting. So think of a song and the words in it. And word painting is like taking the word river and having little trickly notes kind of going really fast, or having like they were going up a mountain, having the pitches ascend. So it's taking those literal words and literally transferring it to the music. We also start to get the patronage system. This is where composers and musicians were paid to work for somebody under a patron. We still have patronage systems today, but not quite like back at this time. They were essentially their employer. They paid for them to write music. We also get a wonderful, amazing invention during this time. We get the printing press. So remember how I talked about most of the common people were not literate? Well, this was still true, but this increased literacy because it made it easier to print written work. It made it cheaper to purchase, but it also transferred to music. So music was mostly for the aristocracy, but now it's more affordable to buy music for the everyday people. We also get the violin invented during this time period by Mr. Andrea Amati. So tell me, what major technological invention helped increase literacy and spread written music? Was it printing press or the typewriter? Another question for you. So word painting, remember I talked about, is very literal. So think a composer chooses the lyric, oh, beautiful, for spacious skies. How should they best use word painting? Are they going to use really fast notes grouped together, or should you use a long flowing notes? So I want you to really listen to what word painting sounds like. I want you to hear an example of this. This song is called Fair Phyllis I Saw, and there's lots of words like birds and rivers. And I want you to listen to see if you can hear those words being transferred into the way the music is performed.
Fair Phyllis I saw sitting all alone, feeding her flock near to the mountainside. Phyllis I saw sitting all alone, feeding her flock near to the mountainside. A shepherd shouting, not where she was home. But after her lover, on nature's high, up and down, 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 he wandered.
Renaissance in the church. Some important things were happening in the church that affected music around the world. We got the Protestant Reformation in Mr. Martin Luther, and where he nailed his 95 Theses to the door of his church, saying all the things he wasn't happy with. Well, part of that is music in the church was performed in Latin. If you're in Germany, like Mr. Martin Luther, did you understand Latin? No. So how are you supposed to understand what was happening in church? You were following blindly. And so Mr. Martin Luther advocated for having music and pieces of the service written in the language of the people. This made the Bible more accessible, religious texts more accessible, and we continue to get people who are more and more literate because it became more accessible. He was known for a type of musical style called the Lutheran chorale, named after him, and it was a strophic piece, meaning it, like think about Mary Had a Little Lamb. Mary had a little lamb, and it keeps that same tune keeps coming back with different words. That's what strophic is. We have the same tune over and over, but different words keep coming in play. If you would like, go look up this piece, Ein Festeberg ist unser Gott. Go look it up on YouTube to listen to an example of a Lutheran chorale. So what type of strophic song style did Martin Luther introduce? Was it the anthem or the Lutheran chorale? So there was some changes in the church styles. We do get a few changes. We get the Psalter, we get Anglican chant, and we get the anthem. We start to get instruments in the church and an overall mix-up as we start to introduce the languages of the people. Please make sure that you're watching these videos before class. If you need anything, call me, beat me. You know how to reach me. Have a great day, guys.